Well, welcome to the Career Composing Podcast, episode number 3. Everyone's career is like a musical composition with your experiences, your talents, and dreams acting as notes that drive the music. We want to help you use your skills to compose a refreshing career path. Share your experience, hear from others, and together let's discuss how your outlook can change for the better. At any point during this live stream, please feel free to join the conversation by sharing your career challenges. This can be done one of 3 ways. One is through the chat mechanism in Zoom. The second one is through the question and answer mechanism. And then thirdly, feel free to raise your hand, and then one of my colleagues can private message you, and then I can grant you access to then unmute. We can then hear your career challenges and go from there. And what I wanted to jump in today to dialogue and kind of process through was kind of a few things. So one, this podcast is not really designed from a standpoint of let's talk about the latest jobs per se. There will certainly be discussion about jobs and dream jobs and what people are looking for. I think part of though is really the higher thinking, kind of at the broader level of, as a career, what are you trying to build? And how would you, again, compose that kind of career arc? And one thing I did want to touch on with the high level of unemployment now, and it's continuing to remain high, is I do want to touch on jobs a little bit. And so what I wanted to do is share my screen and go through 3 articles during this podcast. And again, we're going to take and hear people's career challenges as we cover this, and we can pause on covering that. So let me share my screen, and we will look at the first article. So this one is through LinkedIn. It is looking at who's hiring now. Andrew Seaman is someone who originally posted this, and it has been consistently updated since March 31st when it was originally published. And so you can see that it is just a mass amount of jobs. And I'm actually going to post this also into the sharing it so that people can see it. There you go. So that is now in there so that you can read along with me. So this ranges from, giant needs like Instacart and Amazon, all the way down to some companies that may only have 2,000 or so positions that are hiring for. Bentonville Pet Hospital, Salesforce, and then continuing on down to some that are looking for up to 100 positions, in addition to those that just are unknown. Like BJ's Wholesale Club, there's an unknown number of employees that they're looking for. And so what's great about this article is that not only is it updated with companies that are hiring, but it's also, I feel, sharing. They don't categorize it per se, but I think there's ways, if you do some light research, you see, hey, it's not just only tech companies. There are non-tech companies and others that are hiring currently. Now, one thing that is in publishing this article that they are unable to do really is just constantly update it with how many positions they have left. And so, like, for instance, we'll look at DRW is hiring for 100 positions. I don't know how many they've filled right now or not. But again, I feel the value in this article is sharing what's out there. The next article I wanted to go into was really looking at, as this pandemic, as we continue navigating this pandemic, various states have different stages and phases of reopening, and each phase is each state's very different. For instance, in Virginia here, and the governor is considering to move to phase 2. Which would kind of boost things from, instead of potentially 10 people being able to go into a facility, it could be up to 50. And there's obviously constraints on that. But I found this article to be really interesting. I'm going to add this to the chat also, where as lockdowns ease, this is also a LinkedIn article published just last week. Here are how companies are reopening. And I think this is something to look at and consider as not only now you navigate the career that you may be currently gainfully employed, or you're looking for a career change, but you're still employed, but you may not be content with where you're at. Or it could be one, you're someone who is looking for work. Seeing how other companies are going back to work. This article kind of shines a little light on how some of these are like phased reopening. For instance, like Walt Disney World is doing a phased reopening of 2 of their 4 parks on July 11th, and then 2 more on July 15th. But reading about how they're going about that, I think it can be really insightful about how they are as an employer. And so what I'd shared again were that huge post about lots of jobs. I don't know how many are filled right now. Now moving into here, how some companies are going about the reopening, and how they're doing this in a way that is what they feel is appropriate for the timing, and how they're doing that. I think is also very insightful for you to consider, as not only you yourself are trying to go back to work, maybe you've been working remotely, or that again, you're looking for something that may be a better fit for you. This is something to consider, like how these companies are treating their employees, and what they're doing to it. I find that to be really interesting. And then what I wanted to do next, going from again jobs to now talking about how companies are reopening, is really talking more about kind of the gig economy and side engagements. So here's the third article I'm pasting into the chat. So there's been a lot of discussion on this for the last few years. So this is me not trying to do a broad synopsis of it. It's more of a high level discussion of what people can consider. And so part of our heart in doing this live podcast is to see and hear what people are facing from the career challenges, and seeing if we could help them think in a different view of like, hey, you have this level of experience and you've had these 3 jobs, but you've also had this as a dream. Is there a way we can look at it so that they all intersect in some way, or they all can be represented into one role? And sometimes thinking on these threads about how someone wants to do work can start out as a small engagement. And, people have been calling these gigs. Some people call them other names, but I think gig is somewhat of an appropriate term. This article was published just over a year ago, but I feel the content is still applicable because it's more of a process of how to considering what you do for an engagement. And so their first point is to start with something you know how to do. And so this is more of taking stock of what are some of not only the skills that I do, but like, what is something that you know how to do? What are you knowledgeable on? What you have experience on? It doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in it, that you're a published author in it. It's more of, this is something that I know I can do. And it's even better if it's something I can do well. And I feel that is a good starting point, so that you have this kind of inventory in your mind of like, okay, maybe there's 2 or 3 things that I know how to do. And it could be which one seems to resonate given the current environment. Their next point is that if you are starting to have success in this, and that you're doing this on the side, and it could be your primary engagement right now because you need to put bread on the table, that if you do end up finding a full-time job, that you may not want to stop doing this side gig, because there could be something there. It could be something that you have fun in addition to adding to your broader income. So this isn't something where you do this for a little bit and then you kind of move on to it. It could be something you consider maybe long term if it's a fit. The next point is about making yourself visible. So there are various platforms for freelancers, like Upwork and remote.co. And this is basically you sharing, hey, I can do X, Y, and Z. This is my experience. And then as you go through those projects, you are then getting really reviewed by people that have worked with you. And because of that rating or reviews, you may get more of that business. There are, I think, other platforms, but those two are the ones that I'm always aware of that you can consider. And it's just something to, again, help you get the word out. Because one of the hardest things on really just engagements is you finding your next engagement, you find your next gig. I run a consulting firm, and one of the biggest things that I spend time doing is business development. And sometimes I can do a lot, and there's a lot that I'll then encounter as far as work, and other times I'll do a lot of business development and then I don't find any engagements. Or it could be the promise of a potential engagement down in the future, but it's nothing now. And again, having someone who's constantly looking for sales work for you or something like that. And so in addition to, like, with that said, using these platforms, they are giving you the visibility and that you're able to fill out some categories and things so people can then filter down how to find someone that has experience in skill A. You pop up there, and then you can be able to work on that project and then kind of rinse, repeat. This next point is about don't do it on your own. This shares about, I think one thing that when I think of this point, I think of a lot of things regarding how you can not only use your network, but that it's not like you're it. Yes, you be the one who's doing the work, but there are other ways to leverage that, so that maybe you try something and that it's not working. There are other people who may have tried those things and it hasn't worked for them either. And so you're not having to recreate the wheel per se when you're pursuing these things or you're trying something out. So for example, they were sharing in this article that if you don't want to be a driver, so let's say you want to be an Uber driver or Lyft driver, but you may want to rent your car out. There are platforms such as Hire and Turo that could be a service that you're basically able to rent your car. I have not used either of those platforms, but again, from case in point, it's something. Just because these possibilities may not be your fit, is there something that there is a fit for you based on what you're looking for, and that you've tried it and you're like, well, this isn't really working. Is there something else that you can pursue? And I think there's other options out there. This last point, it talks about really jumping into the economy with both, or the gig economy with both feet. I think it is certainly a possibility of doing that. I think it also depends on a variety of things. So like for me, when I co-founded Wellspring Workforce, which is the consulting company that does recruiting and retention for companies, which this career composing podcast is a part of that legal entity, but it's a different per se division of it because it's a different audience. When I co-founded that company, it's not like people just started, calling me up and saying, "Hey, I need help," and then boom, it's that easy. It's really hard. And I think if you have the ability to certainly pursue something with such focus and effort, I think it's beneficial. In this case, I was still working part-time when I co-founded the company. And my wife was working full-time. And so it's great to generate income, but it was also, I had this sandbox per se that I could create where I was doing this level of work, and that there was money that I was being paid, but it was it took time to really develop that. Years, in fact, to really develop it where it was able to replace my income as if I had been working full time. But it took a long time to do this. And if that's something that you want to do and pursue doing, I think that's certainly potentially going to this point, jumping in with both feet. But I want to add mitigating the risk. And so right now, if there's nothing else that you're able to do because of the pandemic, that you're out of a job, let's say you're able to collect unemployment, that's certainly beneficial, especially with the federal $600 kicker that really boosts that. And that you're able to take those funds and maybe you could start creating a side hustle, as they're talking, as a gig, and seeing where it goes. And so there is a level of experimenting as you go about this process that I would certainly encourage you to do, but it's something that you may have to try a number of different options. And when I as an anecdote, this is somewhat random, but when I go to the store to get birthday cards, for instance, I'm going to a birthday, I don't go to the aisle and just pick the first birthday card I see. I take a moment, think about the person who birthday we're celebrating, and really see what kind of humor they would appreciate, or if there's a certain memory that we have, that, like, they love soccer. I know they love soccer. I'll get something that's a soccer theme. And so it's like a better fit, but it takes time to then come up with what that card is that I feel would be a good fit. I think the analogy breaks down some when you try to take that to starting your own company or starting your side engagement, but it's like you're looking to see what's a fit, given the current market, given that, people may not be willing to spend money on external consultants, or willing to spend money on those who are starting up their own side engagement because they are already focused on trying to keep their current employees on payroll. And so it is certainly a lot more challenging given the economy now, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't attempt it, because there could be something that you are bringing to the table that a company really needs, and that they may have not needed it in the past, but right now, because of how things mix, I think is something to really strongly consider. I also want to add that I think the timing of things is really important. So with how fluid things are with the economy and with the news, that and how that impacts things, what may not be possible for your side engagement now could be possible, let's say 2 or 3 weeks from now. So going back to the timing of the reopenings of different phases in states, there may be a phase that works really well with this side hustle you're trying to do, this gig that you're trying to do, that may not be an option now. And you may have to wait for that time, or maybe now is the best time to start it. Whereas if you waited 3 weeks from now, it wouldn't be as beneficial, or that more people would be doing it at that time. And so let me check to see if what questions have been submitted, to see if there's any questions, or people are willing to share their the career challenges they're facing. All right. At this point, I don't see that people have shared that that we can dive into right now. So I think at this point, I'd like to really start in kind of conclusion with sharing some announcements. So this Thursday at 2 is our next live podcast. And then if you have questions, feel free to, or like to chat further, or want to share a specific challenge via email, feel free to email us at podcast@careercomposing.com. And with that, have a great rest of your day and a great week at that.